Welcome back to the Gyrl podcast. I'm Kyra. All right, let's welcome Alison to the show. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
Awesome. Well, why don't we get started by having you tell the audience listening or watching out there who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm Alison Smith. I live in Scotland and I help people when they're stuck to get unstuck and back on track.
Yes. Fantastic, because that happens a lot,
Yeah.
I think that happens a lot. I think, you can unstick yourself, so to speak, and then you can find yourself in it again. So definitely excited to have this chat with you today. So let's just start off by talking about some of the work you do. So one of the things you do is you work with metaphor. And so let's talk about what that is and how and why you do it.
I suppose actually to give an example is useful, and I'll start with the first one I ever used, which was I worked in business in purchasing, and we were trying to get people to understand why we got enthusiastic about supplier management. And anybody listening might go, yeah, we wouldn't be interested either. And however, we needed the managers in the organization to be listening to us about how they looked after the suppliers differently. And so we asked them to come to a workshop, and then we used gardening as a metaphor. So we just said, so let's design a garden. What do you need to think about where you put the plants? What sorts of maintenance might we need to do? We need to think about where the plants go. We need to prune them. We need to weed them, water them, mow the lawn. We might have a greenhouse where plants go in. We might have a compost bin. And so as soon as you start saying that and then say, well, that's suppliers are very, if we want a flourishing suppliers, then it's the same as what we need to do for flourishing plants. And everybody goes, oh, yeah. And so then they were listening. And so what I realized was the power of metaphor. And then I suppose that started my journey of, oh, actually, gardening can be used for life more generally. So how could you have a flourishing life? How might it be that we're not weeding enough in our lives so that it's got really overgrown because we're not cutting things out that, are unhelpful? Sometimes we might personally need time in the greenhouse because we've forgotten that life has got a bit too busy for us and we need a bit of TLC and time away from all of that busyness. It might just be about, watering and feeding ourselves better, whether that's literally or just by doing things that give us, passion in life. So, and then what I've discovered, I suppose, over time is metaphors are a great way when we're really, I suppose, fixated on the story we're telling. So metaphors are really quite useful as a coaching tool. If we've been stuck for a while, if we've tried lots of other things and therefore we've reinforced our stuckness, it's as if, well, I am stuck and everybody agrees I'm stuck and I'm right about that situation. And so metaphor helps us step out of that story, really, because quite often if we're stuck, we can be feeling sorry for ourselves. We can be quite, sometimes we might be anxious, we might be lacking confidence. And actually, it's all of those lacking of confidence and all of that contributes to us not being able to find a way out of the situation, really. And sometimes the more we talk about it, the more stuck we become, rather than seeing something from a different perspective. And so what metaphor enables us to do is send that story on a coffee break while we have a walk in nature, while we use what we're seeing out in nature, because I use nature more specifically as a metaphor, and just ask our inner wisdom to see the patterns out in nature that would help us make sense of what's going on for us. Because what I've discovered is when we're stuck, we already are using those metaphors. So if you're, I don't know, anybody listening or you, if we're stuck, you might have said, I'm stuck in a rut. You might say, I'm up a creek without a paddle. You might be stuck between a rock and a hard place. Life's an uphill struggle. We're already I would say our inner wisdom is sort of nudging us to go, I know you can't find the solution. I
Mhm.
know you're finding it really difficult at the moment, but I'm giving you a clue here that the rut isn't um, isn't the problem. The rut actually, if we explore it metaphorically, could give you a way out. If you
Mhm.
can't see the woods or forest for the trees, dependent on where you are in the world, one of those will relate possibly. Then let's go and look at what woods have got to say on this situation, because yeah, we'll see a path and go, oh yeah, I just need to follow a path, or I need a map, or I need
Mhm.
to just stop trying to see all the whole wood. I mean, why? Let's just focus on one tree. So
Mhm.
we're using metaphors in our language all the time. And
Mhm.
I just say, if you're stuck and you hear yourself or you hear a friend or colleague using a metaphor when they're stuck and struggling, to say, okay, stop. Let's explore the metaphor, because that's giving our brain a bit of time off. And it's as if we get the problem out in front of us and we're able to see it in that rut or the woods or the um, on my
Mhm.
podcast, I go out and embody these sayings that we use. So if you feel like you're treading water, depends on how good you are at swimming, but I did go out into the sea here in Scotland and tread water in order to be able to say, what would you do if you were treading water? Because that's really
Mhm.
tiring. And when we're
Mhm.
tired, then of course we're not going to be able to find solutions to our problems.
Right. Oh, those are all so it's so very interesting, Allison, because they do agree with you. Like people use all those metaphors, like all you hear them all the time.
Yeah.
So what and when you said it and when you talked it through, even when you talked about the greenhouse, it was so easy to like think
Yeah.
about a situation that you might have and say, oh, well, this problem, this thing that I have, it's the X. And
Yeah.
then, if I need to like weed, then it's really I need to remove these things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
then yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you're
Lovely.
and then you're able to like see, like to truly flourish, maybe I need nourishment, right? And like you said, that could look different ways. It could be, it could be food, it could be spiritual, it could be whatever it
Yeah.
is that is lacking. But I think that that's a really great way. And I don't think most times people really think about life that way or think about their issues. So it's really cool that you brought this to us today,
Thank
and
you.
actually just made it very real.
The I recently I posted something about how to get sort of buzz in your life, and
Mhm.
using the metaphor of how to attract insects and bees into your garden. And I think as you were talking, one of the things that I was thinking about is um, actually in a garden, we wouldn't have one plant in our garden and think that just the same plant. It's like
Mhm.
we wouldn't put one plant in. We'd put lots of
Mhm.
different plants in because we're looking for variety in color. We're looking to attract, all year round color.
Mhm.
We're looking to attract different bees at different times of the year, etc. And yet so often in our lives it is as if we're acting as if one thing's going to give us what we need.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
so so that's why I love metaphor, because it's just that,
Yeah.
oh well, my work is everything to me,
Yeah.
somebody might say. And then it's like, but
Mhm.
that's like expecting your garden to just have roses in it.
Mhm.
And is that going to work in the winter, and that is that going to work
Right.
the rest of the time? And it's that, oh no, perhaps I need a tree, or perhaps I need some
Mhm.
winter color. And so it then enables people to go, oh yeah, perhaps I need to add in other things
Mhm.
to my life to give me what I'm currently thinking work will give me. Possibly, I mean, I'm using work as an example.
Oh,
But
yeah. But yeah, there are plenty. And also too, when you were just talking, I thought about one that I like to use and I always use, I would use at work all the time. I would say, you get more bees with honey. With people, you would have people who are just needing people to support them, needing people to get on board with something. And then, but being very like forceful or super aggressive about the plan. And I'm just like, why don't you by, and I would say that get more bees on him. Like, why don't you just appeal to them and
Yeah,
how
lovely.
they and what they bring to the project and get them excited about like being on board because you chose them specifically because of the thing that they're able to
Nice.
bring and contribute. But I think like people are just like, I hear what you're saying, but I'm like, well, do you really hear it? Because if you really were listening,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's like if
yeah.
you were really listening, then you would like be taking this advice. I mean, so Alison, talk about why nature. So why do you infuse nature into your work?
I think it's because, well, it's there all the time. So we can go out into nature
Mhm.
and we can do it we can do it virtually, if I'm honest, but it's there. So I'm looking out my window, I can see some nature.
Mhm.
Most people would be able to, even if they're living in a city, would be able to see some element of greenery, possibly. So it's available to us 24/7, 365, or this year 366. Um,
Mhm.
and I think the other thing is that it's got loads of patterns anyway. It's like we understand that, day follows night. We understand the seasons. Yes, dependent on where you are in the world. Most of
Mhm.
us has 4 seasons, but some parts of the world, dependent on where you are, may only have 2 seasons, or they may have 6 seasons, apparently. Um, but nevertheless, you're not going to have, let me think, you're not going to have spring follow summer. Yeah,
Right.
you're
Yeah.
always going to have, summer and then some form of autumn and winter, and then you have spring. So, and tides. It's like tides again. Most places have 2 tides a day. It's not for every situation. Um, but again, it's that, oh, I've missed the tide. Well, there's another tide in 6 hours or 12 hours,
Yeah.
So I think it's because we can use the patterns.
Mhm.
I think there's also, and I don't stress this enough, I don't think, about, there's lots of research out there about the power of nature in terms of, at the feel good factor when we're walking in nature, when we connect to nature, when we remember we're part of something bigger. So I think
Mhm.
that helps.
Mhm.
I don't tend to focus on that, but I couldn't underestimate the fact that if I'm walking with somebody out in nature, doing a landscaping your life walk, that
Mhm.
just the breathing in fresh air, being in nature is going to help people relax, because most
Mhm.
often or not, people I'm talking to are overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're anxious, and we're never going to make brilliant decisions when we're in that
Mhm.
state of mind. So the first thing that we have to do is release that stress, release that overwhelm, in
Mhm.
order to be able to access the part that says, oh, I see, that's what I need to do.
Mhm.
And I think nature just helps with that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think what you just said when you talked about like the tides, and you're like, this is not the only one, and I think that is something that we don't think about because I immediately start to think about like real life circumstances. Like I have a friend who's like looking for a new job, and it's like, of course, when you don't get a job that you wanted, then it feels very much like, oh my gosh, like I'm never gonna get out of this other thing or whatever. But like you said, if you can equate that to like nature and thinking about, well, you know what? It's almost like too like the sun, right? The sun setting or the sun rising. Well, the sun's going to rise again tomorrow. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be able to see it again. And also you're going to have another opportunity. Like this is not the only one. This just may not be the one for you. So it's like also being able to like allow that space to know that like also like I always say like what's for me will be for me, and and just because this thing doesn't work out for me, or like I told my friend, because this doesn't work out for you, it doesn't mean that you won't have something better come your way.
Yeah, I think there's a few things there. There's one about the fact that, we plant a seed and then it doesn't grow immediately. So it's that we
Hmm.
don't keep poking, putting our finger in and sort of going, are you growing yet? Are you growing yet? It's like we
Yeah.
sort of know. We just have to give it we have to water it. We have to make sure it's got
Hmm.
sunlight, not too cold or hot or whatever. And that
Hmm.
if we do that, the seed will grow. But it isn't going to grow if we keep
Right. Yeah.
I think the other thing that came to mind as you were saying that was, if we look at a woods, we don't expect every tree to be exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's mean we don't expect it to be the same. I'm going to think make of tree, type of tree.
Right. Right.
We don't expect it to be the same type, but we don't expect, even if it's an oak, we don't expect all the branches and the leaves to be in the same place. It's like that tree isn't a clone of that tree. So if we go out into the woods, even if it's the same sort of tree, we're quite happy with the fact that that tree over there has grown at an angle because it's at the edge of the wood, or that tree has grown because that's where the sun, in order to be able to get the sun as it rises. And so we sort of accept in the wood that all of those trees are doing the best to help them flourish, but we don't judge one tree to be better than another. We just go, that's that tree over there doing the best it can, and there's that tree doing the best it can, and they're both oaks and they're very different. And I think we then at work quite often, a lot of, I suppose, people that turn up for coaching with me are full of lots of must, sorts and shoulds, as I say, where they're looking at other people and going, but so if you look at your friend with the job, oh, well, I should be able to find a job immediately. Well, perhaps it's about the fact that you need time to just decide what sort of job you want anyway, So, yes, I think it's about letting go of the must, sorts and shoulds, because nature's really, if you look at the wilderness and sort of the wildness and the chaos in nature, and yet I wrote a poem about rewilding and say that, actually in our lives, we've tried to take all the wild bits out. We've tried to shoehorn everything into a very orchestrated garden, planned, every part of it planned, every part of it, we're going to take the weeds out. Whereas actually life needs a bit of that wildness kept in it, I would say. And I think that sometimes takes the pressure off as well, in terms of, what would I do? What would I do if I did a bit of wildness in? You know what? I'd go and have a job for the next 6 months that isn't as pressurized as I've had before, that I quite enjoyed, and give myself some time to think about what I really do want to do next.
Oh yeah, I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. This has been so insightful, because I think that we don't often, like, even taking a step back and thinking about nature just allows and puts you in a different mindset. Because even just in this conversation of now, like, here where I am, it's morning, it's around 11. It's like, it's a lot of hustle and bustle going on in my neighborhood today. But just even being able to, like, sort of have this conversation with you and refocus. And like, I was looking outside as you were talking, like looking out the window and looking at the trees and just really thinking about what you said about nature and just how it so easily equates to our everyday life and the issues and, or situations that we may go through. And I think like this has just been a really, really great chat.
Cool. And where you live, I can remember being in the offices on, say, the 6th floor or something, and just looking out, just the trees that just went on and on and on and on. I mean, it's just all the way, 360 degrees of sort of trees, it looked like, and just going on to the horizon. So it's that whole, wow,
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. Okay. So Alison, let's talk about some of you've given us a lot of great tips, but if there's, is there anything that, additionally that maybe we haven't covered that you would like to offer up to the audience? It's just some ways to not, to unstick yourself.
I think the thing is that we underestimate the power of our words. And so, although I've given you one example of where when we're stuck, we might use an idiom, I also think that if somebody's stuck, then what word are they using? Are they using stuck to describe it? Are they describing problem to describe it? Are they describing a niggle, a conundrum? Sometimes just the word that we're using to describe our current situation is keeping us stuck.
Mhm.
So I write a lot about being stuck, and sometimes I think, you know what, Alison, you're writing about being stuck, therefore you spend too much time being stuck, because it's like I'm reinforcing that being stuck. Um, but in the same way is that if you're looking, I had a client who turned up and said that they were failing to find an answer to the problem. Now I can't remember whether they were calling it a problem, but they were looking for the answer and they couldn't find it. And therefore you could spend a lot of time trying to find those answers and sort of shoehorn them down there. So what's an answer? Let's try this, let's try that. But the thing was that what opened it up to them to find a different way of looking at the situation was suddenly saying, what's the solution? So instead of answer, we were looking for a solution. And it wasn't. So sometimes it's about, I've done a workshop recently where it was, what we're looking for. What is it? What's the verb we're attaching to it? And what's the adjective? So it's like, it could be, I'm looking for an innovative answer, or I'm searching for a adequate solution. So I think the thing is we get ourselves really caught up because we're using words that we don't realize are reinforcing our stuckness. So sometimes, before even trying to find the answer, solution, option or whatever, is to go, is there a different word I could use that would enable me to see this situation differently? So if you catch yourself or somebody that you're talking to and is using the word problem a lot, then it might just be about, could we call this something different than a problem? Just to loosen the hold on that word, because that word is attached to the current situation, and the current situation we don't have any, we don't know what to do in. And that current situation is also associated possibly with overwhelm, anxiety, etc. So if we come up with well, it's not a problem, is it? It's a challenge. Some people might like challenge, or it's a game. Now some people would really, I can even feel myself going, oh, game. So I don't know that word would work with me, and I think that's why it's personal. It's like one person might go, but I'm looking for the answer. It works for me every time. Great, stick with it. This is just that if what you're doing isn't working, how might it be that you can change the words you're using to describe the current situation and what you're looking for? Because it could be that you don't want to look. It could be that you want that looking's the wrong verb, and that you need to be searching for it or discover. Because actually you could argue, and this will happen to some people listening, that if they're searching for an answer, all they're going to do all day is search for it. Whereas if you said, you know what, I want to find an answer. Oh, I found it because I've done what I've said. So it's amazing. I mean, I sit there. I mean, I have offered to do word audits for teams because it's just amazing how within a team, I mean, we can do it individually, but within a team, we can get into using language that is unsupportive of our intended objective unintentionally. It's like we don't do it consciously. It's just, it's slipped in. It's part of how we operate. And if we need to become more conscious of ourselves, our behaviors, our mindset, to go, am I in the right mindset to even think about coming up with a solution?
Right.
And then because going back to your friend with looking for the job, it's pointless her looking for a job when she's stressed, because she's gonna, we can imagine that if she's stressed or they're stressed, that they may go for the first job. They may, oh, well, I've got to lower my expectations about the job that I'm going to apply for. Oh, well, I might automatically think, well, I might have to move. And so actually, sometimes it's just about what words are we using that can get us into the right mindset
Mhm.
Because once we've got into and it's not, doesn't take long. It's like there's
Mhm.
lots of techniques out there that would enable us to shift mindset really quickly, that then enables us to go, okay, now let me ask the question and see what answer I get. Because I guarantee if you're in a better mindset, you'll get a more informed and more fruitful response.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And like you said, I think at the beginning, really what stands out among other things is that is really just the power of your own words and
Yeah,
just how,
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
definitely how we speak to ourselves, how we speak about ourselves, how we speak about our situations. And I agree with you. Like I love to use like the word, like I prefer challenge, like it's a challenge. But I think another good example of that sometimes is when I don't know, like if you've ever take like, when you take part in like interviews or things like that. So whenever I'm interviewing people and like usually people are like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And I always say, what are your strengths and opportunity areas? And
Oh,
then, and
nice. Yeah,
yeah.
nice.
And
Yeah,
I
I
hear
like
you.
that.
And I'll get people who chuckle, and I'm like, well, they're not weaknesses. They're just opportunities for you to be better. Like
Yeah,
even the
nice.
things, yeah, even the things that you see as a strength, you're going to work to develop and be better. And so they're both just that. It's just maybe you're farther ahead on these skills than the other skills. And so I always find, people, because it is like in our society, like most people try to find that way to put themselves down. So then people will still say, oh, well, and something that, is a weakness. I'm like, nope, an opportunity. Like, we don't see it as a weakness. And then, and I'm like, but that's just where that importance of
Yeah, nice.
how we speak to ourselves comes
Yeah,
into
yeah.
play. Okay, well, tell us about the journal you created, your prescription for well-being journal.
The prescription for well-being started because I realized I write poems because they help me, and a lot of the techniques I discovered because they work for me. So the prescription for well-being worked for me, and then I realized, oh, hang on a minute, I could do a journal and share it with others. So the prescription for well-being works on the premise that for example, when I get myself really agitated and out of sorts, there are certain activities that I know to do that when I'm out of sorts, I forget to do. Yeah, because I'm in the overwhelm, I'm in the anxiety, I'm in
Mm-hmm.
the bad mood, I'm in the oh, and therefore
Right.
I forget what works,
Mm-hmm.
but I also forget the sorts of things I should stop doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose the two things that really cottoned on that I need to write it down, which is where the prescription comes in, was one that certainly when I was going through the menopause, then quite often I was waking up in the morning and feeling out of sorts. And my personal trainer and I realized that doing the plank is one of the quickest ways to get me back in and out of that thought
Mm-hmm.
process. But I don't think to do it unless he turns up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that writing that down on the prescription. It's like when I'm feeling agitated, then
Mm-hmm.
the prescription, one of the things to do is do a plank. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing, because there's another on so they're blank prescriptions. There are poems in it. There's loads of suggestions about what might be on your prescription. But basically, the journal is here's a prescription. And you might have one for when I'm not sleeping. It might be fitness. It might
Mm-hmm.
be confidence. It might be job interview. I mean, so you can write them very specifically for a job
Mm-hmm.
interview, or it could be write it for, out of sorts or whatever. But what I realized was, and I really don't know why I do this, but when I heard somebody say that there was perhaps a reason for it, but when I'm out of sorts, it's as if I watch movies that reinforce my out of sortness. So I'm not good
Mm-hmm.
on death and destruction,
Mm-hmm.
lots of, brain, shootings and blood and, death and
Mm-hmm.
murder. And yet that's exactly what I watch when I'm out of sorts. And
Mm-hmm.
it's as if I go, and I'll get into a series and then it'll be about 2 weeks later when I realise, why is my mood shifted? And it's because I'm watching that type of movie or series. So the prescription it does ask if there are any idioms, because I would suggest if you're feeling unconfident and you're actually saying I'm stuck in a rut, then one mechanism for solving it is to do what my first book said, which is can't see the wood for the trees. And that gives you, as does my podcast, just gives you hints and tips about how to use the idiom to find the solution. But what the rest of the prescription then does is say, what can I do to help? Or what do I know that helps? What do I know that I need to stop doing? And then who might I want to talk to? Whether that's, a counsellor, a particular friend when I'm feeling like this. And it's just a reference manual that you can go to actually remind you, I'm feeling like this, and I've written on my little prescription that going for a walk helps. So that's where it comes from. It's to be fair, both books are reference manuals, really. One is the prescription to remind you to scribble in it, and then you can refer to it at any point when you're feeling out of sorts. The other one, Can't See the Wood for the Trees, is much more about, I resonate with a particular saying, and therefore each chapter gives you, if you can't see the woods for the trees or the forest for the trees, then there's 5 or 6 different techniques that you could use to help you see the wood, or to get out of the creek because you've lost your paddle or whatever.
Awesome. Love that. Why don't you tell us, Alison, how people listening or watching can connect to you, or how they could work with you?
Lovely. Connecting to me, then I would say there's lots of Alison Smiths in the world. It is alisonsmith.co is the website. But if you do landscaping your life, either as a hashtag or the 3 words, that'll find me. So Landscaping Your Life on YouTube, Landscaping Your Life is the podcast, Landscaping Your Life is the tagline in my book. So Landscaping Your Life isn't used by others. So the good thing is that finds me. In terms of what I do, then I do coaching. I'm looking to do some retreats, solo retreats particularly, but coaching can be done virtually. So I can be sitting in my office, you can be wandering around nature, a garden, woods, wherever you are. So I've had people in various parts of the world doing that. And then, the podcast, I suppose, is one means of keeping up to date with what I'm doing. But on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, etc.
Awesome. Love that. Well, I have to say, I have really enjoyed this conversation. It's been very eye-opening and just really great for how to connect nature to problem solving and finding solutions in your daily life. And I love the prescription for well-being journal, because I think that's important. A lot of times people don't write down what works for them. And then the next time you're spiraling out, then you're just spiraling out. And then you have to go through all those things again to get to the thing that worked. Yeah. And then it's like you spend all that time and energy every time repeating it, as opposed to having a tool like this where you could just write it down.
You could have one as a family, so that everybody has one, has one in the family, and everybody just goes, oh, I've noticed you're out of sorts, let's have a look, and use it as a reference guide. Because if you've written it, you're more likely to follow it than somebody going, oh, go out for a walk.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going out for a walk. Oh, but over here you wrote in the prescription that going for a walk helped. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I know. Maybe I'll go for the walk.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Awesome. Well, if I said it.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Okay. Well, we're going to move into 3 things with Alison now. I'm going to ask you 3 questions that just helps our audience listening or watching get to know you a little bit better. So the first one is a 2-parter. How do you start and end your days?
Start the day with a bath. Showers are far too busy, get me too so a leisurely bath is a really good way to start, and actually would go down on the prescription, because I sometimes are too busy and then I cut the bath out and then realize that. and end the day reading. Yes, the last thing I'm doing before I go to sleep is read, generally fiction of some description.
Awesome. All right, number 2, what's a goal or an intention that you set for yourself this year?
To do more public speaking and, I'm going to say it out loud, get a TEDx talk.
Yes. It's out there. It's out there.
It's out there. Yeah,
yes, we hear it. All
yeah.
right. And last, where are you currently finding inspiration?
Michael Neal. Yes, Michael Neal. I've sort of become a bit of a Michael Neal groupie. He's written a number of books, Creating the Impossible. I just love and get inspired by, I suppose, his ability to blow holes in our justification for why we're stuck. So I think it's coming back to how we think impacts our outcomes, but he just does it with such a loving and down to earth sort of way that yes, he's who I keep going to at the moment.
Awesome. All right. Well, Alison, I want to thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to share with the Gyrl community. And I'm going to ask you one last thing before I let you go today. What are 3 things you'd like the audience to take away from our conversation today?
Watch your language, as in your words. Words have power. Have patience like nature. And use metaphor. Just practice. Have a little go at using metaphor. Notice when somebody says something and just try it out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Alison. Thank you for a very insightful discussion today. And I wish you all the best. And you can always come back here and share with us in the future.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Stay tuned, everyone.